Hi, I'm John at Coach Slade Tutoring, and today we're looking at a problem that afflicts thousands of people who are learning to code, and that is tutorial hell. We'll look at what tutorial hell is, how can you define it, and it's kind of almost a disease of learning. It's a dysfunctional way to learn to code. So what are the symptoms of that disease? We'll also look at an example tutorial user who's going to kind of show us the source of some of those problems. We'll look at why people keep going back to tutorials, and for D, and D is really the core of this talk, the most important part, D is looking at the causes of those symptoms and solutions to those problems. And finally for E, we'll look at how you can take your learning a step further. Let's get started. So what exactly do I mean by tutorial hell? Now this is not a scientific or academic term. It's just something people talk about online a lot. Something I do in my quest as a computer science educator is I read different subreddits and discords that have people talking about problems they're facing as they're learning to code, and this topic shows up at least once a week. It's a very common and very frustrating problem that lots of people have, but it's not a scientific or academic term. So what do I mean here? Number one, a person spends many hours, perhaps hundreds of hours, going through tutorials, but they're unable to apply what they've learned to real problems, to other problems, to their own projects, and so on, and they kind of feel after spending hundreds of hours that they've learned nothing. Number two is the paradoxical part. They feel they don't know enough, but instead of kind of saying, this way of learning does not seem to be effective, they just go back for more tutorials, thus continuing the cycle. Now this talk, a couple things, is not about career stuff. If you're looking for career information, not about that. It's about the learning process. And actually I think people can get a lot of value from online tutorials, and they're an excellent resource. However, you need to be careful in certain ways that we will go over. So tutorial hell is almost like this movie Groundhog Day. In the movie, the main character, played by Bill Murray, wakes up and the same day is always happening. It's always this specific day, Groundhog Day, on the calendar, and it's the same thing over and over, and he can't escape that. So tutorial hell is like people are doing different tutorials over and over and over, but they feel like they make no real progress. So here's some quotes about tutorial hell that are kind of going to show us how people feel. And these may be things that you feel. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and tell me which one of these you feel in the comments. I feel A, I feel B, I feel all of these. But let's just read these over. These are different quotes I pulled mostly off Reddit where people are discussing this. A, I finished the tutorial and understood everything, but then I can't do anything with it. B, when I go to write code, I can't remember anything, or maybe one simple thing, but that's it. C, I couldn't figure it out, so I looked at the solution, and they call this random function, and it's like, how am I supposed to know that that's what I should do there? And D is a big one. D is maybe the worst. C and D I think are the worst. Whenever I see other projects, I have no idea where to even start. So I really think each of these quotes kind of shows a different symptom of this dysfunctional way of learning using tutorials. A, the illusion of competence, right? They feel like they're learning something, but in fact, that feeling may be mistaken. There's a mismatch between what they've really acquired and what they feel like they've acquired. B is just poor recall. This is just sort of a way of saying you don't remember and you can't pull up the proper information at an appropriate time. And A and B have fairly well-researched ways to get around these problems. C is not knowing where to apply these concepts or the functions you're learning, the framework you're learning, the syntax you're learning, and so on. You're not being properly trained or properly learning where to apply these things, because really it probably wasn't a completely random function. It's something that maybe they showed you a few modules ago and you're just not spotting it, right? Now sometimes there are things that come out of nowhere, that does happen, but for the most part I really think C is a failure to learn how to recognize situations where to apply these things. And finally, D. I think really the problem with D is not understanding structure, okay? Now, what do I mean by structure? We'll get into that, but D is quite serious. This D is really the main reason why a lot of people do all these tutorials and they've kind of got the syntax down, but they still feel clueless at the end of the day. So we'll look at each of these. We'll look at solutions for each of these. But here we're going to watch a quick example I made. It's just me going through a tutorial. And as I said, that'll kind of provide us a way to look at where some of these problems come from. So go ahead and watch and enjoy that. Hello, my name is Billy. I am a 19-year-old student, and I've never coded before, but I heard about this awesome website with lots of free tutorials, so I'm going to get started today. Today's the day that I become a real coder. So I'm starting this project here, step one. Wow, I'm going to build that. That looks really professional. So wow, I'm just going to get started coding, and I feel like I've seen this before. I'm not too sure what it does, but let me just go ahead and follow this example code and type it in. Okay, and there I've got it all typed. Let me see if I got the right answer. Oh my God, I got the fireworks. I'm so good at this. It says the world rejoices. Wow, I'm on such a fast track in my journey of learning to code. Go to the next challenge. Yes, let's see how challenging this is. And wow, I'm already on step 76. This is step 76. I've made such quick progress. And I've got, oh, well, there's so much code here. Okay, now it says I need to add this bottom line to the second HR element. Let me find that. Oh no, I don't have to find it because they've already found it. And in fact, this is the only place I can type. Well, that's great. I can't get confused here. I can't go mess up the code I've already written, and they tell me exactly where I need to do this, so that's great. I can keep making fast progress. So it says, add the bottom line class. You know, I'm a little confused. I don't quite remember what a class is, but hey, it looks like right up here, it says class equals price. Maybe I'll just do the same thing on this little space that they're giving me. Don't really know what that does, but let's see if it's correct. Oh wow, I passed it again. I'm making such amazing progress here, and I'm learning so much. I'll be finished with this beautiful menu in no time. I'm already becoming an expert. So hopefully you found that funny, found that amusing, and it's not hard to see the appeal of learning this way. It's easy, right? You just go through the steps, and it feels good, and they tell you exactly what to do. Because it's broken down into these tiny, granular steps with thorough instructions on every step, you never get confused. It gives the feeling of fast, measurable progress. Everybody likes that. Everybody likes this feeling of going fast. One person I gave this talk to said that he felt addicted to the feeling of fast learning. And it seems like you're really learning because this is all measurable. You can watch the progress bar kind of fill up. However, they're tracking it on whichever site you're using. Percentage done. Some of them have little green icons that fill up, and people love that. And you've also built something. Your code seems to work. You can look at it, and you can say, yes, I achieved this. So it's easy to see why people like this, but many find the results lacking. However, they still keep coming back to more tutorials, which seems a bit paradoxical. It seems a bit maladaptive. So why might they do that? Well, first of all, there's been some research. This is just some information from a book called Make It Stick by Brown. And they've done research showing that students choose ineffective study strategies. This isn't the actual research study. This is a book discussing some of those research studies and the general concepts. But they've generally shown that many students will choose a strategy of learning that feels good, but isn't necessarily empirically shown to be effective. In that particular case, I believe they were just reviewing their notes, reading them over, and they felt very good about that. And it feels very fast and fluent as you're rereading these notes, and that feeling of speed and fluency is something people can mistake for meaningful understanding. But actually, real learning can feel rougher and more difficult, and what they've shown is that people favor these strategies such as rereading their notes or perhaps using a tutorial that gives you a feeling of fast progress, and they kind of mistake those feelings for more robust learning and understanding. And so it's common to think this feeling of fluency or ease indicates understanding, when in fact that's not necessarily true. I also think people may blame one particular tutorial. Well, I did this, it wasn't right for me, so I'm going to this other website or this other module on the same website. And really, you can try that, of course, but after a certain point you have to say, maybe there's a deeper problem, maybe sort of the way you're learning and using these materials is a bit off. And tutorials, most of all, are easy, as I said, and they give you that wonderful feeling of progress, like leveling up on a video game, right? People just love watching green icons appear and bars fill up, or you saw the fireworks in the example video. They're very rewarding in this kind of superficial way. Now, for coding in particular, I think it's different than certain other domains because it's hard to know how good you are, right? How do you know exactly how good you are at coding? So this comes from a few reasons, right? I think one reason is that CS curricula, CS learning materials, coding learning materials, they don't have such a well-defined linear sequence as, say, math does. Math, there's a clear linear sequence that people follow pretty much through middle school, high school, and even through most of undergrad. For example, if you're learning algebra, this is before calculus, calculus is before real analysis, and so on. So people can kind of look at how long they've been learning and where they are on that path. Learning math has these clear mile markers. Computer science and learning to code really doesn't. It's hard to know how much you should know after a certain period of time. And another thing is that people kind of talk about learning stuff in sort of a vague way that I've noticed over the years of teaching. People will say, like, I've been learning to code for 2 years. Well, how many hours per day are you putting in? Okay, because some of them say that, but they put in like 2 hours on the weekend and that's it. Other people are putting in 8 hours a day. Clearly, one guy 8 hours a day for 2 years is very different from the guy just twiddling around with it on the weekend, right? But people talk about it that way, which I don't think is a really accurate way to think about it. And another thing with coding is that none of us really are doing things from scratch, maybe a little bit, but even then you probably have to look a few things up. However, if you have to look everything up and you can't figure anything out for yourself, you don't really know much, do you? So how do you know where you are, right? On this spectrum of I looked up nothing, I looked up everything, you're somewhere in the middle, but how good are you really? It's kind of hard to tell. And because it's hard to tell how good you are, it's also hard to tell if you're making progress, and I think that's part of the reason why people go back to tutorials that they may have found ineffective, is that they don't know if they're making progress, but the tutorials feel good, so they return to them. And again, you can get a lot of value out of online tutorials, but there's right and wrong ways to use them. There's more and less effective ways to use them.